Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Please post your comments to be part of the narrative. Now, William Blackstone had a major impact on our founding fathers, his most important work being his commentaries on the law of England. And in that work, among many things, Blackstone wrote about three types or categories of law. The first being the laws of nature. Blackstone noted that although God gave us free will, he also set up this natural law that helped regulate, to some degree, our personal choices. We must live with the consequences of our free will choices. And over time, humanity actually kind of figured that out. Now, I speak of natural law because when our justice system was separated from this idea, our justice system was turned into a legal system. The difference being oftentimes justice is not served with a hard and fast legal ruling. Oftentimes there are mitigating circumstances that would allow someone who broke the law for the sake of something far more important to be found not guilty under those same mitigating circumstances. But that same legal system could be and has been the genesis of what we now call lawfare. The second category Blackstone mentioned is the revealed law. And now this portion of our legal system is what was lost in the transition to case law. Revealed law could only be found in the scriptures, and the purpose of case law, which is what Harvard replaced natural law with, was to separate us from the ideals that were revealed as being the most humane and most morally good in Scripture, and replace them with man's idea of what he would like to be humane and good. The idea that we could decide what a man or a woman was, or that we could decide when a person becomes a person, and when a person, quite frankly, is no longer a person. You get the idea. But a third and final category of law would be municipal law. Things like taxes, speed limits, how and where something can be built, those kinds of things. And it's important to note that Blackstone taught that these laws must also conform to the laws of nature and nature's God. With that, I'd like to bring in my good friend, Mike Levine. Good morning, Mike. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Chuck. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Great, great. So, the one of the big things that seem to be all over the nation, and quite frankly, right here in Florida, is property taxes. That would kind of fall into that municipal law kind of thing, and so I wonder how property taxes and the revealed law of God could play, kind of play against each other. Or what do you think at all about what we're talking about regarding property taxes?
Well, Chuck, politicians make the laws, and politicians decide what we're going to do collectively and what we're not at the various different levels of government. But let's just keep this within the state of Florida for now, because property taxes, as you and I talked about off camera, are set locally. But today, as we've talked about many times on this live stream, the state of Florida is extending its arm into local government issues. So the point person on that, of course, is our new chief financial officer, Blaise Ngolia, supported by the governor. And just so everybody needs to keep in their mind that Governor Ron DeSantis and Blaise Ngolia are colleagues. I mean, they're very close. Okay. They strategize together politically all the time. I mean, Blaise Ngolia arguably certainly is, Governor DeSantis's number one guy in the Florida Senate. So the point is, I'm in the real estate business, and I've learned over many, many years that everybody's affected by property taxes. And voters, let's just say, people who vote are typically homeowners. Okay, I would suggest the preponderance, vast majority of people who actually vote are homeowners. So it's, when you get into housing issues, everybody's for it. Okay, because everybody is for reducing property taxes. That's how homestead tax exemptions are set and things like that. So as it goes to, you know, this is a no lose topic is my underlying point, Chuck. And let me just wrap this up real quick, because when you talk about lowering property taxes, who is against that, Chuck? Right? It's a no brainer. This is a political football masquerading as, like, for example, let's just ask the question real quick. Could Ron DeSantis have done this in his first term, in his first year of his first term? Yes, he could, but he didn't. But he's doing it now. So if you want to, we can talk about why CFO Blaise Golia and Ron DeSantis, in conjunction with some other really good people in the Senate, are doing this now. That is my point, Chuck. I hope I didn't take
Yeah.
too long to get to it, but that's what I'm saying.
Well, the reality is, until President Donald J. Trump started talking about lowering and getting rid of all of our taxes, this has just not been on anybody's radar. I don't care what level of government you find yourself in. All of a sudden, President Donald J. Trump talked about eliminating so many different taxes, one of which was property tax, and I think Florida kind of jumped on that because it looked like a winning strategy. But
Yes.
I don't. I'm not hearing though in the real conversation. I'm not hearing eliminate property taxes. I'm
Well,
hearing mitigate property taxes, maybe come up with a way to keep them from escalating as quickly or in different ways. For instance, the idea that at the year or at the value of your home when you register for your homestead, that rate you would be locked into that rate until you sold your home, and that means that property taxes wouldn't continue to increase, but they wouldn't be going away.
well, Senator Jonathan Martin from Lee County, I believe, started out in committee weeks in 2024 and proposed launching a study into the elimination of property taxes. And then, of course, you got to remember that there are all kinds of property use codes out there. So, the question is, when you eliminate, based on Senator Jonathan Martin's original premise, eliminate property taxes, does that mean eliminate property taxes for all property types? Does that mean that high-rise commercial buildings in downtown locations, 50-story buildings, are going to pay no property taxes? Well, when you say eliminate property taxes, that's what you're saying. But then the conversation pretty quickly got pared down to homesteaded properties, properties where the owner of the property claims the property to be his primary residence. Okay, that is a lot more manageable than the alternative. And now you can
Right.
see that when the parties involved start participating in the conversation, then there becomes some pushback, and the conversation quickly gets modified into all the things that you just got done talking about. Well, we'll make the property, we'll just say that at the time of purchase, we're going to lock in the value. But keep in mind that counties can raise millage rates. They can, the property tax equation is a two-sided equation where the taxable value of the property is on one side of the equation and the millage rate is on the other, equals the tax, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things people can, these government, and keep in mind, Chuck, counties live off of this money, right?
Right.
So you've also got to have a conversation about, what are you going to replace it with? Or as, Chief Financial Officer Ngoli is talking about right now, maybe these counties just spend too much money. And
Yeah.
I haven't taken the time to go through the budgets, even here in Lake County, line by line, but I assure you that when you get into it and you see what the county commissioners, which I think are the best, the most effective form of government in Lake County, the commissioners, I think the constitutional officers are totally off the rails. And then that's what, in Angola is speaking to that. But of course, the 67 counties all have different financial profiles. So, it's not a one size fits all situation.
Right.
But I guarantee you that if a real business person went in and took a look at these budgets line by line and said, what are we spending our money on? There's a lot of things that we spend money on that does not benefit taxpayers, Chuck.
So Mike, obviously this recent, and we've talked about it a lot. Hopefully, people aren't concerned about continuing to talk about it. This recent ruling or law that's taking the authority of the counties away regarding where affordable housing can and how much affordable housing can be put into the any particular county, and those low income housing things are draining the counties, I think, because more and more people are being, I guess, the tax, the amount of people paying the taxes are eliminating or are getting lower, the way I understand it, and probably I got it wrong. But you have the state kind of harming the counties in regard to in one way, and then blaming the counties for increasing the taxes in another way. So I guess I can't regulate those two, or I can't harmonize them. Why am
Right.
I having a problem?
Right. Because it's a shell game. That's
Yeah.
the reason you're having a problem. So, for example, I mean, honestly, and I like Blazing Golia, don't get me wrong. But I mean, look what he's saying, Chuck. I mean, he just spoke. You were there at the Republican Party of Florida quarterly meeting over the weekend. And from the podium, he was attacking counties. Am I right? Check me and make sure I'm right about that. He was
He
attacking them, saying that they're wasteful spenders and the state needs to rein them in. And he's going to doge all the counties and hold them accountable for spending. Right, Chuck? Isn't that what he said?
yeah, there was a Doge comment made. Yeah.
So basically, he's saying publicly that the counties are irresponsible with their money. Correct, Chuck?
Yeah, you can draw those distinctions, or you can make those assertions. That's not what came out of his mouth.
It's not.
Again, what he said, and
No,
I
he didn't
think,
say it that way. He didn't say it that way, but he did say it. He said that the counties are not making good use of their money, which is irresponsible. So, at any rate, my point is this: I met Blazing Golia back in 2010 or something, and back then he was going county to county to the Republican executive committees, and he was putting on an hour and a half long presentation called "Government Gone Wild," and he used to actually put up spreadsheets over the state government and just show, where the government waste, fraud, and abuse was. So this is on Blazing Golia's, um, you know, his talking points ever since I've known the guy. And but I'll be honest with you, if Blazing Golia will walk that out, then I'm very happy because I mean, I'm a fiscal hawk, let's just say. And Angolia has been about waste, fraud, and abuse for a long time. But of course, you pick and choose your battles. So what we're
right.
talking about right now is the tax base and who pays the taxes. But Chuck, so for example, let's just get to your point. You said that fewer and fewer people are paying the taxes. Okay, so I'm going to basically interpret that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that homeownership is going down. Am I? Is that what you're saying? That
Well,
homeownership is declining in the state of Florida?
yeah, well, affordable housing is all about people getting some sort of a tax. I think the uh, the companies that are building these big apartment complexes are getting huge tax benefits from doing that. So,
Abatements,
yeah,
abatements,
yeah.
which
Well,
is a
you get
real problem. Okay, that is
that's
a
kind of what
real
I'm
problem.
talking about. That
Okay, yeah, because the cost of servicing um, um, residential dwelling units goes up in a multifamily situation. Single family homes are cheaper for cities and counties to service than high density multifamily apartment complexes. So that's true. Okay. But keep in mind, yes. And then to give them an abatement, which was 75% originally under the Live Local Act in 2023. And then, of course, that was the outcry, Chuck, as I rail as like almost a lone voice in the state of Florida railing against the Live Local Act. Um, Eventually, cities and counties had to come on board because it was literally bankrupting cities and counties. So
Yeah.
people had to say, yeah, and again, it's that is such an interesting relationship between the cities and counties and the state, because the state holds the purse strings. They appropriate money back to the cities and counties every year. So the cities and counties are very reluctant to argue with the state because especially with a very heavy-handed governor like Ron DeSantis, and now of course Blaise Golia is like making Ron DeSantis look like a pipsqueak because Blaise, again, who I like, is out there saying that if you don't comply with what we're telling you, we are going to withhold funding from your cities and counties. So this is an example of what we're talking about. This is an autocratic leadership style. Okay, whether you like Blaise Golia or not, that's what he's saying. So,
Yeah.
and we can get into the alternatives on how you might accomplish the same thing with a different bedside manner, but that's what you're saying. But my point to you is this, Chuck: the more, as a percentage of the total housing population, the more population that is renting increases taxes to the local counties and the state, because there is no homestead tax exemption and there is no cap on the homestead tax exemption. Well, we can talk about the cap another time because we probably need to define that for people who don't know. But I would suggest most people watching our live stream either are or have been homeowners in the past in Florida, so they understand the cap on the homestead tax exemption, the limitation on increasing the taxable value of a homestead. So we can talk about that. But the point is, Chuck, that housing is a major revenue driver. Today, we're talking about the possibility of eliminating, let's just boil it down to the only really practical solution. The best we could possibly do, in my opinion, would be to abolish property taxes on homesteaded properties. That would be the best we'll ever be able to achieve. And as you're pointing out, um, lawmakers are backpedaling off of that now. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I think what they're what I'm hearing is that possibly rather than eliminating your property tax, you might be uh, what your values were when you homesteaded, when you filed for your homestead, would be your values until you sold it, so it wouldn't go up. But again, all this stuff is being discussed. What I'm hearing is that something will be dealt with, or it will be on the agenda for in 26. So we probably want to keep an eye on that. Quick little change in a moderate change. Lowering interest rates, how does that affect, or how, what do you think that would do for housing? It seems to me like we've talked in the past, and you're not overly excited about lower tax, interest rates. That you don't think that's as big of a help uh, in regard to your ability to own a home.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I'm going to start by talking about why Donald Trump wants it. Okay. Number one, Donald Trump wants to, interest is an expense, a pure expense, right? So you get no benefit from paying interest. Okay. Other than the benefit of using someone else's money for the things that you're spending money on. But the lower interest rates at the Federal Reserve, lowers the cost of debt service in the United States. And Donald Trump is all about lowering the cost of debt service in the United States, point number one. Point number two, when you lower interest rates, you make investment more affordable. So you're going to grow the economy with capital investments. Okay. And then you can get into tax policies and make those capital expenditures deductible in the year that the business acquires the um, investment inventory, whatever that is. So those are the benefits that Donald Trump sees. Number one, it's going to lower the cost of debt service, which helps him balance the budget, which is actually amazing that the federal government actually had a surplus in the second quarter of 2025, a surplus over, so uh, really interesting. But my point that you're bringing up, Chuck, is that when you, again, if you think that housing is overpriced, and you can apply it to any other commodity or consumable, cars, for example, people buy large ticket items based on the down payment and the monthly payment. So when you lower interest rates, you're actually propping up housing prices and you're propping up automobile prices too. And of course, the president is all about the automobile industry and the tariffs, and we can get into the whole conversation about tariffs. But right now, we're talking about interest rates. So it's also true, Chuck, that let's just use seniors as an example on fixed incomes. Seniors like high interest rates because they can put their money in very safe and secure investments like certificates of deposit and get a higher return. So again, that is the basic fundamental premise of algebra, right? It's a two-sided equation. So I understand from a federal standpoint and from a macro standpoint why the president wants lower interest rates for the reason I already described. But there is a downside to it. And for me personally, I would like for the government to be completely out of the housing market, and let the housing market find a natural equilibrium. And I would like for the federal government to be out of the interest rate business and let banks set their own interest rates, instead of having that capital funding rate that is the overnight cost of money to banks set by the Federal Reserve. So let me just see how I did with that answer, Chuck. You can come back in and make sure that I talked about the things you asked me to talk about, and then of course give me your perspective.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I guess the one idea that I thought I heard you mention in the past is the idea that, if as soon as you make something easier to buy, then of course there's a higher demand on it and there's not enough property going around as it is. So lowering the property taxes could actually, again, shoot the price of housing up. That's
exactly, Chuck. And it's so interesting that people don't even, like, for example, I was with Florida Realtors at a regional broker forum last week, and I just asked the president of the Florida Realtors about affordable housing. And basically, as long as everyone in the supply chain, Chuck, benefits from high housing prices, you're going to get high housing prices, including the state of Florida. And we've talked about it before: documentary stamps on the deed, documentary stamps on the mortgage, other taxes. And then everybody in the chain, just go through a typical closing statement whenever real estate transfers and go through everybody who, took money in and sent money out. And you're going to find that there is no equation that supports affordable housing. It's a one-sided situation. Affordable housing is just lip service. Nobody's going to do anything about it. So that's a really interesting point, Chuck. And maybe I know that I get a little convoluted in some of these answers, and hopefully the viewer can follow what I'm saying. But I'm telling you, Chuck, no one is actually looking at the economics of the situation and providing solutions for everyday Floridians. Everything goes to an industry, the government, a special interest, et cetera, all the way, again, when you talk about the supply chain, all the way from the acquisition of land for development, and then all the development, all that kind of stuff, it all benefits from rising prices, Chuck.
Yeah, I guess a lot of things do, that's for sure. And along with all of this stuff, we also have, I thought maybe we could kind of cap this off with a little conversation on property insurance, because that's another problem that is not advantageous to solve to most people who are involved in that particular arena. What are your thoughts on property insurance and somehow getting those under control?
Chuck, I served on the board of directors for the Florida Association of Realtors for at least 12 years. Every single year, insurance is on the table. It's always a conversation, a concern to people who regulate things that are associated with real estate. And the problem never goes away. And I could go into recommendation after recommendation about how, we can lower the price of in real estate, in, property and casualty insurance in Florida. There's a million recommendations that have been made over the years, and none of them actually get done. Because again, this is just uh, uh, it's just something that people don't really want to talk about, the actual core problems. And I've held for 25 years or more that as long as we build expensive buildings along the coast, you're never going to solve the problem. But if you ever say that to anybody in the government or in the development business or in the insurance business or anything like that, oh no, that's not really the problem. That's not really the problem. But in Florida, if you build around on the coast, it's not a question of if you're going to have a storm, it's when and how often are you going to have a storm. So as the cost of construction and building things and replacing things and repairing, real estate and stuff like that goes up, obviously, then the cost of insurance has to go up. So the question becomes, why is nobody putting a moratorium or limitations on what we can build along the coast? And it never comes up because all the reasons that we just talked about, as it relates to affordable housing, as it relates to interest rates, as it relates to insurance now, it's the same story, is that everybody benefits from expensive real estate. Real estate, is a cornerstone of the foundation of our country is property rights. And everybody wants the price to go up. And again, you can look at Donald Trump's in the real estate business, right? You can go back, and our parents and grandparents and great grandparents always told us that if we own real estate, then the value of that real estate is going to rise over time. And this is how you create wealth, right? I mean, that's the story in America. Can you agree
Right?
with me, Chuck? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the premise. So everybody's bought into that premise. But when the cost, housing is a utility, okay? And that's another whole conversation, utility versus commodity, because we treat real estate like a commodity when in fact, for human beings, it's a utility because you have to have one. And as you continuously drive the cost of real estate, you consistently price people out of housing, Chuck. And then it goes back with every component associated with housing. So you get, the cost of housing would be, the principal and interest payment on your loan, interest being the operative word, okay, because interest is an expense, just like Donald Trump wants to keep the interest expense down for the United States of America. We'd like to keep the interest expense down for property owners, except that when you lower the interest rate on housing units, Chuck, the price of the house goes up. And I'd rather pay high interest than a high purchase price because I can refinance and modify my financial situation associated with the asset. But once I close, I can never change the purchase price. And nobody thinks about this. And I challenge our viewers to give that some thought. Would you rather pay a high interest rate and a lower housing price, or would you rather pay low interest rates and a higher price for the house? And I'm telling you that once you close on the house, you cannot redo that. But finances can be refinanced. You can pay it off. You get a windfall of income one year. You can lower the principal balance, et cetera, and things like that. So this is why we get a higher and higher, like for example, a higher and higher percentage of the population in the state of Florida cannot afford to live here. And if you want to see a classic example of where we're heading, just look at California, Chuck. That is where we're heading.
Yeah, well, hopefully somebody will pay a little bit more attention. It does seem like there's a lot of conversation about eliminating taxes and conversation about property insurances. I mean, at least we're having the conversation. I think that's probably, I don't know, I think that's a good thing. Uh, I think those of us who actually kind of the electorate, those of us who are actually pulling the lever, are circling the bubble for our representatives, we need to be paying attention to what they're saying, and more than what they're saying, what they're doing, because there are things out there. There's laws that have been passed that cause me to be utterly confused about what our legislators are really trying to do regarding who we are right here in Lake County, Florida. So with that, our time is pretty much up. Would you like to make any closing remarks, Mr. Levine?
I'm just telling you, Chuck, that this is a big shell game. And, we use the word today gaslighting because that's what it is. And these decision makers are gaslighting us. And I, because we're so over our skis, it's hard to even determine whether these policymakers really understand what I'm explaining to you in this particular live stream. Because I'll be honest with you, when I told the president of the Florida Association of Realtors last week that affordable housing is unachievable as long as the supply chain encourages rising housing prices, his face went blank. And I know the guy very well, and his face never goes blank because he's never been asked the question. None of the people involved in the cost of living in Florida actually answer the question on behalf of the citizens of the state of Florida. The question always gets answered according to the perspective of special interest, Chuck. So we're not even talking about it. As I said before, we've been talking about homeowners insurance in Florida for as long as I've been in the real estate business, almost 30 years, and nothing effectively has been done about it. So then you get to the politics of it. So I'm saying to you, Chuck, that we are talking about it, but we're not actually addressing the issues, Chuck Benoit.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Levine. And thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Like and share our program, please. And remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, be a part of what is going on out here. You will be governed by tyrants. So I'll see you next time. And meanwhile, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.